and welcome to For the Love of Nature, a podcast where we tell you everything you need to know about nature and probably more than you wanted to know. I'm Laura.
And I'm Katy. And today, this is going to be a very exciting episode because we are talking about squids and science communication, but it's not Laura and I talking about squids and science communication. We have a guest for this episode.
Not that we haven't dabbled in both of those topics earlier, but we're not by any means professionals in either one. Okay, maybe science professional.
Yeah, I was going to say science communication, come on now, but we have dabbled in squids before, a little bit, but not too much. Not
Squid
too much.
dabbling.
Yeah, but we have an expert.
Yeah, so everyone, welcome Sarah McAnulty.
Hey there, thanks for having me.
If you've ever listened to any of our episodes before with guests, we're just gonna get to know Sarah a little bit better, get to talk with her about her specialties, squids and science communication, and then hopefully, and then Sarah too, if you have any questions or comments or want to add anything, feel free. Okay, I guess first, let me just tell our listeners a little bit about you. So Sarah McAnulty is an American squid biologist, science communicator, and street artist. She graduated from Boston University with a bachelor's in marine science and then earned her PhD from the University of Connecticut. She is the founder of Skype a Scientist, a nonprofit organization that connects scientists and teachers around the world for live video calls. So we are super excited to have her on today.
And Laura got all that from Wikipedia, which I feel like that's the crown of when you've made it, is that somebody can pull your information from
off Wikipedia.
And it be correct.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about that.
Accurate.
Yeah.
Good.
We have to tell you, so our manager, Kim, who makes sure that we stay on track about everything, she is an Uber fan of yours. She's listened to your biologist episode, and there are several other listeners who are like, Sarah's gonna come on. So we're trying not to make this too big of a deal, but it is a very big deal for Kim.
Awesome. Glad to hear it.
All right. You want to just flip-flop back and forth like normal, Katy?
Yeah, we can go. You want me to start first?
Sure.
Alrighty. So Sarah, let's go back to the beginning. What influenced you to become a scientist, and in particular, a squid biologist?
Good question. When I was a little kid, I know this is a weird thing for a little kid to be into, but I really liked squid.
Listen, that's awesome.
Thought they were so cool. Octopuses were fine, but I really thought that cuttlefish and squid in particular were completely captivating and amazing and weird and cool. And yeah, from when I was a little kid getting a tape out of the library and watching it at home, and it was a general ocean video, and it introduced cuttlefish specifically, and I just couldn't believe how weird and cool they were. And so I started there, and then I eventually went to college, and that was 10 years later, and didn't know that squid biologist was even a job. My parents were my mom was a therapist and my dad was a Spanish teacher, and so they didn't really know what scientists did, what the wide breadth of scientists do. No, most of us don't. And yeah, so they were maybe if you like squid, I guess maybe you'll work at SeaWorld, maybe you'll work at the Camden Aquarium. We don't really know where you belong in a professional world liking squid, so you should just study biology. So I started as a biology major, and then I found the marine science department, which is what I actually wanted to study. And then I met a woman who was a cuttlefish camouflage researcher. She came to give a talk.
At your school?
She wasn't at my school, no. She came and gave a talk at the Boston University Marine Program, and I freaked out. I was like, this is it. This is my job. This is who I'm supposed to be. I was like, oh my God, I didn't know that this was real life. This is great. So after that, I went up and talked to her. I was like, hey, you have my dream job. You don't even understand how amazing it is to meet a person who has the job that I didn't even think existed. And so long story short, after that, I started working with cuttlefish that summer. That was after my sophomore year. And then I worked with them again the summer after that. And then eventually went to grad school to continue squid stuff. And so my PhD was on Hawaiian bobtail squid and their symbiosis with bioluminescent bacteria. So my PhD is actually on molecular and cell biology, not marine biology or
God bless you.
Squid PhD. Yeah, it was. I mean, it was great. I hadn't even taken cell biology before going to get a PhD in cell biology, which is perhaps ill-advised, but it was all fun.
Talk about diving into the deep end. That's diving into the deep end of gasoline while you're on fire.
It felt
and just like hoping for the best.
That's brave. So I studied marine science as an undergrad, which honestly was, I don't want to say mostly fisheries management, but a lot of what we talked about as a department was like climate change, ecology, fisheries management, and like marine geology. Like I took a marine geology course.
Oh, that's cool.
So, it was truly marine science, not marine biology. The degree was not marine biology. So I didn't have a lot of the deeper biology classes. In between undergrad and grad school, I knew that to get a PhD in molecular and cell biology, that I was completely ill prepared to actually do that. So I took off 2 years and went and worked in a lab that was doing diabetes research, not because I was particularly interested in diabetes, but because I knew I needed some time to fill in the gaps. And so
that's smart call. That's a smart call though. Cause I mean, a lot of students, because I know, and I hope a lot of students with career pathways and career development, and it's stuff like that. Sometimes you have to take a step take a step off to then get back on the track that you need to. And I think so many people forget that's okay. That's okay thing to do sometimes. Yeah.
And it was great because I moved to Germany for that job. And so I
awesome.
Sweet. I had neither boyfriend nor dog at the time. So I was like, what are we waiting for? Let's live somewhere else before I settle down into grad school, so here we are. So I worked with obese mice. It was very cute. They were so fat and so cute. And so I looked at their pancreases under a microscope. And also during that time, I used iTunes U, which I don't even know if it exists anymore, but they had
I forgot about that.
It was useful at the time. This was back in 2012. They had full biology courses from, I think it was Stanford. Randy Sheckman is a Nobel Prize winning cell biologist. He hadn't won the Nobel Prize at that time yet, but I took his cell biology course. I didn't get graded, but I got all the information into my brain so that when I did go to grad school, I wasn't totally up the creek without a paddle. Yeah, that's how I became a squid biologist.
Oh, that's really awesome. Cool. And I think that is all important for listeners because I was just talking to some coworkers the other day who were fresh out of college and thinking biology is so vast.
It is.
So vast. And most people going into it have no idea that there are even certain career choices, like squid biology. Or if you can dream it, it exists, I promise you. But finding your person. Right. Did you, the woman who came to talk, was she always passionate about cuttlefish?
I don't think so. Her name was Lydia Methger. She grew up in Germany. I don't know how she got to be a cuttlefish biologist. So she at the time was a staff scientist under this other guy, Roger Hanlon. Roger Hanlon led the lab. Lydia has her own lab now, but at the time she was a staff scientist. So she wasn't the head of the lab, but she's the head of her own lab now. And she was really interested in the structures in cephalopod skin she was doing a lot of stuff on the structure of those cells / structures. Yeah.
I was just wondering if she was a total squid geek too and was holy crap, this is amazing for me too because I have now found a person who is as into cuttlefish as I am.
I don't think she felt that way. She was a little overwhelmed by my enthusiasm. Yeah. But that was fine. She was so great. She was a really wonderful mentor because also at the time, this has certainly gotten better since then, but I had no female role models. The entire marine science department was men. The entire department was men. 0 women.
Yeah, and I could see, too, the difference between, I bet there are more women in marine biology, but not in marine science.
Maybe.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, what a good point.
I don't know. Maybe not. But, marine biology, I feel like every girl wants to be a dolphin trainer at some point in their life.
I know.
So,
it was
lots of people are...
It was wild because I think 60 or 70% of the students, undergrad students in marine science were women. And we looked to the next level... Nothing. Nobody.
Yep.
And that wasn't great. So in addition to her being a cuttlefish scientist, she was a woman cuttlefish scientist. And it was just great.
Yeah. Some serendipity that you guys met.
I felt very lucky. It all worked out. Yeah.
Yeah. So follow up to the question of how you got there. What does a typical day look like now that you are a squid biologist?
Well, are
you doing stuff with squid a lot?
So no, not even a little, what? well, it depends on how you say doing stuff with squid. So now my job is being the executive director of a nonprofit that does science communication. And how this all happened, I was a graduate student. I was doing science communication on the side just for fun because I was having a good time doing it. And then Trump got elected in early 2017, got inaugurated in early 2017. And scientists online were just in an absolute panic spiral about a lot of it was like really introspective, sad sack stuff about we've failed as scientists in communicating the direness of climate change if people are voting for this guy, because if you vote for this guy, you clearly don't realize how bad climate is. Yeah. So they were like, what can we do? Oh my God. And it was just this, doom spiral. And nobody was really doing anything productive. It was just grief and doom.
Freak out.
And freak
just
out.
Sheer
panic.
Freak out.
And understandable. And there's space, obviously. There's a need for having that moment. But I was like, hang on, there's so much energy right now that could be funneled towards something good. And so I founded this program called Skype a Scientist. We match scientists with classroom, scout troops, libraries, anybody who needs to talk to a scientist. The goal here is to have personal connections made between scientists and people who aren't scientists. And the idea behind that being having a friendly face to science that you can build some kind of relationship with might make you trust science a little more, might make science seem less of like this very distant to modern everyday life stuff, make it more personable and accessible and all of that. Started it then. I did it because I thought it needed to be done, not because I thought it was going to be my job, because I loved being a squid biologist. I loved it. It was the best. But it kept growing. And then when I graduated with my PhD 2.5 years later, it was too big of a program to continue being a squid biologist and also run it. And there was nobody else to run it. And I know that makes it sound like I trapped myself in science communication.
Listen, Laura and I get
but
it.
I did. I did
it.
And I'm okay with it. Like because looking at what your actual job is as a professor, the amount of time that you actually get to spend with the animals in the lab is so small that I was like, I don't know if it's worth it generally. And so if I could make the amount of money I make now, which is not a lot, it's way less than a professor makes, but like, it's fine compared to what a grad student makes. If I could make this amount of money and do what I did in grad school, run this program and do some squid experiments, like that would be ideal, but that job doesn't exist. So here we are, I'm running this full time and I do a lot of squid communication. So I know the people listening to this podcast can't see me, but you at this moment can. I've got these squid that I glue on to poles and walls in public. It's a street art technique called wheat pasting. And it's all part of this greater project called the Squid Facts Project. The Squid Facts, it's like, it sounds silly, but hear me out. I really think it might be more useful than meets the eye. The Squid Facts Project is like a many-pronged beast that all is focusing on getting squid facts to people.
Because this was the texting thing, right?
Yes. So
because I think from a distance, not knowing you prior to this, I feel like that's when you really kicked off a presence online. That's whenever I first heard about you, was from the Squid Facts, the texting thing, is everything was then pointing back to you on that. And that's when I first heard about you, was the texting.
Yeah, there have been a couple inflection points in the science communication trajectory here. The Squid Facts project does really well. Yeah. The idea here, as I was spending a lot of time on social media and spending time with other science communicators who primarily use social media to communicate, we were finding on social media, the people who willingly follow a squid biologist, even the social media accounts that get a lot of followers, let's not include maybe like Bill Nye or Neil deGrasse Tyson, but even them to some extent, if you're following even Bill Nye or Neil deGrasse Tyson, like you like science. At least a little.
Yes.
Like you are
you're already invested. Like, you're already invested.
Right. It's not really a new population. Those are people that already like science, probably already trust scientists. So yeah, Bill Nye has 6 million followers on Twitter. So all of those 6 million people, it's a huge reach. It's a huge number, but it's not like it is unlikely to be
niche.
Completely new audiences, right? So this is something that a lot of us have talked about again and again, and just like been frustrated. How do we break out of these bubbles and actually reach people who aren't science interested? And so I was like, all right, let's just start playing around and see what works. And so I started with my car, the Squidmobile. She's just a RAV4, but I drew squid all over her. And then on the back window, it says, want a squid fact? Text squid to 1833-SciText. And that's the third generation of Squidmobile. There were earlier things that didn't work as well, but that's that's where we've landed. And that worked. And then
I would absolutely in traffic be like, snap a picture of
That's what I saw. And because I can't remember what it was, but somebody took a picture of it, and then and I think it was oddly enough on Reddit.
Yeah.
And it just took off from there because everyone was like, oh my gosh, we need to text this number.
Yeah, that was back in April. It went extremely viral in April. But it's been like that since like 2018. It's been just driving around the East Coast since 2018. And then in 2020, I started with a sticker campaign. So I've got these little 4-inch by 4-inch stickers that say, want a squid fact, text, oh yeah, to 1833 SciText. I wanted to see who was coming.
Which is awesome. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I was thinking, I want to know who's texting from the Squidmobile and who's texting from the stickers. So I have different call signs for both. I never really dug into that data, but whatever. So here we are. And then I started engaging more in the street art community here in Philadelphia, which is a very rich culture of street art compared to some other places. Lots of graffiti, lots of stickers, lots of wheat paste, lots of stuff happening in Philadelphia. And then I started doing the wheat pasting, which are bigger. They're handmade. They're all different kinds of squid. And that is where you put wallpaper glue on the wall. You stick your art to that, and then you plop wallpaper glue on top of that again. And then it kind of weatherproofs it. They'll last a couple months, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, depending on where you put it and how actively the city cleans where you put it. It's definitely not legal, so I don't recommend that.
I was just going to say, that was my next question.
Yeah,
it was like,
the stickers,
how is receptive?
Well, it really depends on where you live. Philadelphia, there's a ton of street art. It's like literally part of our culture. So and the fine in Philadelphia is, the worst that could happen to you is you get a $300 fine for littering. And in all likelihood, that's probably not going to happen, but it could happen. So if you know you're already in a vulnerable community where you get targeted more than like a white lady, then that's the worst that could happen to you. The worst that could legally happen to you. We know that horrible things can happen to you doing literally nothing, but that's a whole other kind of conversation. So anyway, but if you were I was talking to a group of graduate students in Edmonton in Canada, and that's in Alberta, and they were like, we don't have hardly any street art. So I'm like, you really shouldn't do this then. It's going to be
very apparent that it was
Edmonton
you.
It's probably not the spot to do it. But it's so ingrained here in Philly that I sign them. Like I put my handle on them.
That's awesome.
Because it's okay. Because a lot of the street artists do that here. And it's just like normal.
As long as you're not defacing private property.
Right. It depends on the place. Most of it is like the subway poles that I do. Some of it will be abandoned buildings, which are technically private property, but they have the plywood over the windows that many people will put stuff on. So it becomes like a community
bulletin
art board.
Yeah.
And so that you got to pick your spots and have judgment. I'm not going to like put it on somebody's house, obviously. Like, but like, that would be a ridiculous thing for me to do. Yeah. So then we have a hotline that texts people back with squid facts. That costs $250 a month to run. But originally it was me texting everybody back. But
oh my goodness.
Yeah, that was fine at the beginning because it hadn't gone viral yet. So maybe it was increasingly getting busier. And there came a point where I was pretty regularly texting 10 different people every day. And that's when I was like, this is too much. I need a robot. So that's when I started with the robot. It's a company.
But also, were you ever
Groundswell.
texting and anybody was like, who are you texting? Asking, and then you have to be like, I'm Squid Facts. Like I'm like
people all the time would be like, what is this? Explain yourself. And other times people would just want to talk about other stuff. Texting the Squid Facts hotline. And so I would talk to them about other stuff, like whatever. But the robot does not have that functionality. The robot just texts you auto
Squid Facts.
Squid Facts.
At least you have your mom being a therapist and everything. You've got like a listening ear.
That's right. That's so true. My mother certainly taught me patience with people for sure. So that was useful. So eventually, I switched to the robot. And then in April of this year, it went viral over and over again. Because sometimes when one post goes viral, like meme aggregator accounts will rip it and then post it again and again. Literally 25,000 people texted the hotline in a week.
Oh my gosh.
It just blows it up.
It broke the hotline. The hotline stopped working because it was just too much traffic.
The poor robot.
Poor robot was doing her best. Oh man, it was pretty funny though. But yeah, anyway, so at the beginning of this year of 2022, about 10,000 people had texted the hotline. Now, I'm looking at the numbers right now, 58,498 people have texted.
I mean, did you ever think that you would hit that point?
No.
I mean, you weren't, obviously you knew at some point you had to turn it over to a robot, but
I didn't ever think this would happen. No.
Yeah.
And I put my stuff in so many places and I try to make different iterations unique so that it feels new every time to people. And that's worked pretty well. One of the things we're working on for next summer, because I'm like applying for the grants now, so it's like a lot of lead time, is doing bar coasters focused on wildlife that lives down the Jersey Shore. Because a lot of people in Philly go down the shore for the summer. And so we're focusing on like horseshoe crabs, comb jellies, ghost crabs, animals that people are actually likely to encounter on vacation, but who they might not like really think about them.
Know anything about
them, may not really appreciate them for how cool they are. And I'm working with local artists here in Philly. Each animal will be designed by a different artist. And then it'll be like, learn more about the shore, text shore to the same hotline. But when you text shore, it'll spit out Jersey Shore animal facts. So yeah, we're trying to like keep it also relevant to the people that we're talking to and not just do all squid all the time. Like the Squid Facts project is nice because it's just like a playground for testing techniques and seeing what works and what doesn't. Then I can use that information to then do other stuff.
Well, I really think, too, it would help. Thank goodness your passion is about such an unknown, quirky creature.
Right.
I feel like if you had, I don't know, a sheep-mobile. Well, horses maybe, but sheep, no. Not as many people would take you up as, I don't know anything about squid, and they're cool.
Right.
And so it's an animal that is perfect vehicle for this.
I think
it's the curiosity behind it.
Yeah. So when I'm like driving around Philly, I'll have people just be like Squidmobile, please explain yourself. Like, what? There are no squid in Philadelphia. What are you talking about? And that's always a good, inroads to conversations with a scientist.
Yeah, really cool. So where are you getting the money from to do the hotline?
It's hard. Mostly from small donations on our Patreon.
What's the name of your Patreon so we can send everybody there as well?
Please do. It's patreon.com/Skype-a-Scientist. So that supports the whole Skype a Scientist program, but the Squid Facts project is part of Skype a Scientist. All the science communication I do is part of Skype a Scientist.
All through there.
Yeah, that would be great for you to support. And we also have a little shop where we have squid stickers. You can get the Want a Squid Fact squid sticker and then put it wherever you live. That would be great, spreading the Squid Facts that way. And then we have, these are actually like so silly. We just released these yesterday. These are like Squid Facts advent calendars. And they're like scratch.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
They're very cute. Another squid biologist, she's actually an octopus biologist, but she designed them with me. They're like scratch offs. So like every day of Advent, you take a coin, you scratch off, and then you get a squid fact every single day. So that's at squidfacts.bigcartel.com. That's our merch shop.
Okay.
And so you can get stickers and Advent calendars until... I don't know. The 23rd of November is when we're shipping out the calendars because I want you to have them for the first day of Advent, which is December 1st. Yeah.
Cool. So donations to Patreon, you're getting it that way. And then we were just talking about grants.
We are a 501c3, so I do apply for some grants. We sometimes get little grants here and there, but we haven't really gotten a big one. I one day hope to get a big grant, but it hasn't happened yet. So yeah, that's generally how it works. We haven't gotten any grants for the Squid Facts project yet, but I've submitted 3 this month, so fingers crossed. Gotcha. One is for specifically the coaster project.
Oh, yes. So a typical day for you now that you have moved away from squid biology and into science communication, what are you doing on a daily basis as an executive?
I'm writing grants. I'm answering emails from teachers, helping scientists figure out how to best communicate their work. I'm making things for the Squid Facts project. I host live streams about once a week during the school year that are Q&As that anybody can hop into, so you don't have to like go through the process of getting matched with a scientist if you don't want to. I run science trivia. Right now it's still every single Thursday night, but starting in December, it's going to be once a month. And the second Thursday of every month, you can come to science trivia. I write half of those questions and then other folks write the other half. It's a wild mix of what my days are like. It really depends. Yeah. It depends. Sometimes I'm filing really boring paperwork with the state of Pennsylvania. Sometimes that's what I'm doing. It really depends. Yeah, but that's generally what I do.
Cool. Besides science communication through Skype, you're using your art to do it, which is really cool. I saw you have an Etsy shop. Is that yours personally or for other things?
My Etsy is me. That's when I embroider little squid and stuff like that. And the other thing that's me and not Skype a Scientist are the classes that I teach through Atlas Obscura. I teach an animal mating class twice a year and then a squid class twice a year. And that's like the animal mating is a 4-week class all about animals doing it. It's so silly and fun.
That we've loved. We've done we've done 2 episodes so far about animal mating, and
There's some of our popular ones.
Yeah, I'm teaching it again in late January leading right up to Valentine's Day. So it's every Monday in late January up to the day before Valentine's Day, because Valentine's Day is on a Tuesday this year.
Yeah.
That's going to be a silly time. And yeah, I also teach
How long are they?
90 minutes, Monday nights.
Okay.
And you don't have to be there at that time. You can watch it some other time in the week. You don't have to, they're recorded so you can watch them later. It's more fun to be there, I think, at the time, because then you can ask the questions live, but you don't have to be if that's not, working with your schedule. And then, I teach like cephalopods 101, but actually I don't really talk about octopuses. We call it life lessons from cephalopods, seize the day life lessons from cephalopods. But I like touch on octopuses, but I don't go too much into octopuses because I feel that octopuses get too much attention compared to squid.
They do get a lot.
They're very cool. Okay. Yeah. I'm not going to say octopuses aren't cool. They're great. It's just that squid are also extremely great and more diverse than octopuses. Like octopuses, for the most part, you're an animal with 8 arms and you sit on the seafloor and you do weird, cool stuff on the seafloor. But squid, there are so many different types of squid, different shapes of squid, different behaviors, different habitats. Like there are so many ways to be a squid. And there's pretty much just one way to be an octopus. And that might be because
That is like a proverb. I want that on a shirt. Yeah. There are so many ways to be a squid, but only one way to be an octopus.
There's maybe like 2 ways to be an octopus, but like generally speaking, maybe 3 at the most. But like, there's like 100 ways to be a squid. And
let's get rid of the saying there's lots of ways to skin a cat, and we'll just make it there are lots of ways to be a squid.
Yeah. There are like about 300 different species of squid, so I like to say there are 300 ways to be a squid.
Oh, cool,
so there you go. Yeah.
So why do you feel that science communication is important? I mean, obviously this is in, mine and Laura's field that we love, but what's your take on it? Why do you feel the importance of it?
I mean, I think that many of the problems that we're facing right now as a society, not all of them, but a lot of like the really big ones are solvable with more science literacy. Climate change being one of them, and COVID. Hello, what a swing and a miss on that one. Like we could have done it. We could have made this so much better, but people didn't trust science, and so it was a mess.
The one time that we like really need people to just trust scientists for one time couldn't do it.
Yeah, it was a real you had one job science type situation, and we just like Lucy and Charlie Brown with the ball. It was tough to watch as someone who's tried to work on science literacy for years and years. I was like, oh my god. So basically, I think that trust in science is incredibly important to saving our own butts. Climate change being a huge part of that, and we need people to trust science and scientists, and that isn't really happening. And so the silos that we have ourselves in right now, partially because of social media, it's really, really easy for people to really curate the information that they receive in ways that just is already what they already think and what they already think that they know. That's a huge problem. And so breaking through that, I think, is essential and isn't really happening enough. So that's what I'm trying to do. And like the Squid Facts project, it seems silly and like objectively is silly.
But that's why it works. But that's why it works.
So here's my big hypothesis going right now. I think that the messaging, just not even the messaging, just the reality of climate change is bleak. The reality of COVID was bleak. And pretty much like all of the news, maybe not all of it, but like maybe 90% of the news coming out of science, the world of science generally, has been negative. And I think as a result, when your everyday person hears a scientist coming on the news, they brace for bad news. And so some portion of the population, when they see the scientists come on, is just going to literally shut down, start scrolling on their phone, turn off the TV, stop listening, because they're trying to protect themselves emotionally. And maybe that's maladaptive for all of us. But that is, whether or not that's true is almost beside the point, because we can't stop them from doing it. They're going to do it. They're going to do it. And so we need to stare that reality in the face and figure out how to fix it. And
that there's got to be, because like you're saying, I feel like it's we're on a 2-way street here. It's very important for us to get the word to the non-scientists out there, but I also think it's very important for the scientists to realize that they also have to be better communicators and listen. The listening part is half of science communication and is also part of it that doesn't happen. I think, particularly in the last, 3 to 5 years, there's been a heightened focus on
moralizing as we talk to each other about what is good, what is bad. And overall, that's a good thing. It's good that we like check ourselves and think about what we're doing. But when that prevents you from having enough empathy for someone who's not doing everything right, voting for the right person, and shutting them out, that means that the communication isn't happening. And maybe for you as a person, as an individual, that's the right choice for how you want to live your life, and that's totally fine. But if all of science says, oh, you voted for someone different from me, you don't understand the things that I understand, you're dead to me, we're screwed if that's how we approach these things.
Definitely.
We need to have some of us, at least, willing to listen to those folks and empathize with them enough to get our messages to them effectively. And I think a lot of it is like repairing emotional damage from the bleak reality of both climate and COVID. And so having a silly Squid Facts project it's not doom and gloom. It's just silly. It's, hey, you want to learn a thing about a cool animal? Hey, we're from science. Would you like some fun science facts? I promise I won't say anything sad to you right now. And I could talk about how some deep sea squid are threatened by deep sea mining. But I'm going to just not for a minute and allow a positive experience with science to happen in the hopes that we can build off of that for the next thing. So that the next time a scientist comes on the TV, they don't literally immediately turn it off.
It's because it's definitely got to be, and I know Katy feels the same way, that what we've seen in our career is people have to love something in order to give a crap about it.
Right.
So you're helping them fall in love with squid. Then we can worry about them wanting to protect squid, but first they have to love them.
You got to get there first.
I think anything in science. No, they have to love the planet enough to want to save it. We've both worked in zoos, and a lot of animal people aren't really people.
That's true.
They've chosen the career for that very reason, but they still have to talk to people. And I think there almost has to be more training. If you go into a hard science field, you have to realize that communication is important. You will not be in a silo. We don't live in that kind of world anymore.
Right. Well, unfortunately, it's easier than ever to be in a silo. It's the easiest it's ever been to be in a silo, but it's not working out for us. But I don't necessarily think that every scientist needs to be a science communicator. I think it's okay for some of them to, if you don't want to do science communication and you're forced to, the science communication that person does is often
it's painful,
so bad.
Right. So even if they're not trained in communication, at least be good at sharing information to the people that need to be. Like we shouldn't be holding on to this information that we've found, because who are you finding this information for? It's not just you.
For real. Yeah, absolutely.
And trying to find anything, thankfully we've both been in grad school where we had access to scientific papers, but otherwise it's really hard to find that information out there and disseminate.
And to even understand what the heck is going on in a field like
very true.
Adjacent to yours, let alone
No, all important. Yeah.
That's a really good segue though. Laura, do we want to go over some like fun squid questions now?
Yes, yeah. So like we were saying, we think it's very important. And we do it, our listeners hopefully
oh yay, we have another guest.
Yes. We have another guest. This is Myotis. She's named after bats. Look how cute she is.
That's so cute.
She's just a baby. She's covered in spider webs.
She's been exploring.
She's my little dust mop.
A little scientist herself.
That's right.
Our listeners know that we sprinkle in the doom and gloom, but in general, we're trying to reach who we call nature novices, which are the people who are listening to a nature podcast. So obviously they have a little investment, like you were saying, but might not know everything. So we want people to fall in love with the stuff that we've fallen in love with. So squids. Katy and I both talked about squids in the past, but like I said earlier, we're by no means experts. So we wanted to ask you a few questions about what makes them so incredible. First of all, let's super generic. What makes a squid a squid? What makes it different and unique than anything else?
Good question. Generally speaking, it have 8 arms and 2 tentacles, except for the ones that don't. They generally have color-changing structures in their skin called chromatophores, except for the ones that don't. Because squid, here's the thing about squid. There are a lot of things that we use the word squid to describe. And some of them are quite different from each other, like the ones that don't have 2 tentacles and the ones that do. But generally speaking, they're a cephalopod, which means that they have a mantle, which is basically their torso that holds all of their organs. And then they've got their face that has their eyes and their arms. So their face has their arms on it. And that's basically what makes a squid. But there's just so many different places that they live. Whatever rule you come up with for squid, you're going to be like, wait, but then there's that one squid that doesn't do that. So it's very hard to say what a squid is. An octopus is like a cephalopod with a head and 8 arms. And then there's the squid that have all sorts of different things. But cuttlefish and squid are pretty closely related. They're both what we call decapod cephalopods. So that means 10-limbed, broadly, cephalopods. And so the cuttlefish also have 8 arms and 2 tentacles and have many of the same internal organs that squid do. And even some squid have more organs in common with a cuttlefish than they do with other squid. So it's a phylogenetic mess, the decapods. So like when we say there's a squid and cuttlefish, that's true, but is that an accurate representation of how everything is related to each other? The lines are a little bit blurry. Like what makes a cuttlefish is you have a cuttle bone, which is a shell that used to be on the outside in evolutionary time and then was brought inside. And it's a buoyancy device. And they are able to transfer gases between their blood and this internal shell, so that they stay neutrally buoyant in the seawater. They don't sink, they don't float. So when you say what makes a cuttlefish, no problem. 8 arms, 2 tentacles, and a cuttle bone. That's a cuttlefish. But what makes a squid, things get really hairy.
Interesting. It's a cephalopod that's not an octopus or a cuttlefish.
Pretty much.
It's a squid.
Yeah, right. There's also nautiluses that are like very obviously a nautilus because they have the big spiral shell, but they're way separate in evolutionary time from the rest of them. They're their own thing.
Cool. Yeah. So out of the 300 species of squid, how many have you worked with directly?
Great question. I've worked with reef squid, market squid. So that's like the squid that you'd eat in calamari. Bobtail squid.
Hold on. Quick side note. Why do they call them bobtail squid?
Great question. They're not really
tails.
Squid. So, because they have round, silly little butts, and their little fins are really short and stubby and fat. And the fins, I think, are the bobtail in that. The bobtail squid, many cephalopod biologists say you shouldn't even be using the word squid to describe them. You should just be using the word bobtail.
Bobtail.
Poor bobtails. I'm like, but we use the word squid to describe a vampire squid that like really, really isn't a squid. They're like their own thing, but like closer to the octopus family than
they're terrifying is what they are.
They're silly guys. They just eat poop. They eat poop and mucus and dead stuff. They're doing their best. They're not trying to hurt anybody. They just
That's another t-shirt we need, Laura. It's just like a little vampire squid. It's like
I'm doing my best.
And I poop. Yep. And then just like a little vampire squid.
Cuties. So I worked with bobtails, working on symbiosis, and then cuttlefish. Cuttlefish aren't squid, but cuttlefish. I worked with Sepia officinalis, the common cuttlefish. I've also collected, at least from freezers, broad club cuttlefish from Japan and other little bobtails. So Hawaiian bobtail squid, and then these other little bobtails that live in Japan. I've caught those as well and used those as well for sequencing. Yeah.
That's quite a variety. That definitely is a variety.
Yeah. And I did work with octopuses for a minute as an undergrad for a brief spell.
Awesome. You're like, no, thank you.
No.
Back to squid.
No,
cool, but not as cool.
Cool. Not cool. I'm trying to give squid their day.
I feel like now talking to you, you know how every state has that like, ring state that they're like, We're from Pennsylvania and it's always West Virginia.
Right.
And then here, Texas, everyone's like, Oklahoma. I feel like squid people now are like, octopus.
I think that might just be me. Like I think most other cephalopod biologists are like, of course octopuses are cool.
Love all cephalopods.
And I'm like, these fucking octopuses. I've had about enough of them.
That's how we are with pandas or some other things. We're just like, they get too much. It's too much.
Right. Yeah. I just think that squid deserve a lot of attention. They're so weird, so cool, so amazing. And so many weirdo adaptations that I want people to know about. So that's why I'm like on a crusade to bring squid to more people.
So that brings up a good point. In your opinion, what is the most fascinating aspect of squids?
Oh, there's so much to talk about. I think probably their communication with color change is one of the coolest things. So there's some species that do this in really complex ways, and others that like just don't do it at all. So Humboldt squid have flash white and red, and they've got some bioluminescence going on in there too to help boost their contrast in those patterns. And they've got many different patterns that they seem to line up almost like words to communicate with each other. And we don't understand it completely.
This is terrifying. Like this is when we start to get down the path.
cool.
It's cool, but because they are animals, people just don't give them enough credit.
We're not giving Humboldt squid enough credit, I don't
That's
think.
what I'm saying. And so that's why it's terrifying. That's like, oh, guys, we're missing an opportunity here.
Yeah, so we've learned a lot about this in the last 10 years because people have spent more time observing Humboldt squid. But yeah, scientists, not me personally, other scientists have put together a library of their patterns. And they don't know what they all mean yet, but they're working on it, trying to figure out, like, when they flash, this means this. And by contrast, there's another squid, the Caribbean reef squid, Sepioteuthis sepioidea. They live from the east coast of Florida down to northern South America in the Caribbean. And we have a pretty good sense of what each of their patterns means because they're really easy to find. You jump in the water where they live. They're pretty abundant. They live in shallow water. They're not super skittish. They're curious about humans. They're like, what are you? I better check you out.
That's cute.
They're really cute. They're like really lovely to swim with because you can't make any sudden movements at them. That's a wild animal that's much smaller than you. They will eventually become afraid of you. They will check you out and maybe follow you around for a little bit. And just be like, so yeah, we have a pretty good sense of what their patterns mean, but they don't seem to do it in succession the way that we think maybe the Humboldt squid do. We don't understand enough about the Humboldt squid to make any hardcore clear statements there. But I hope that those scientists keep going, and I can soon. So anyway, the reef squid will put on one pattern particularly around mating. There's a lot of patterns. They'll put on this one pattern that's, I think I might be interested. And then the male will be like, well, I'm interested. And then the female will be like, well, I'm interested. And then it's a different pattern than the first pattern. And then they'll be like, it's on. And then mating will start happening.
If only real life was that easy.
Yeah, it's like,
you know what I mean?
Yep.
Just that.
Good.
Just that
okay.
direct.
Yeah. I'm just gonna.
Well, it'd be so cool. We've talked about animal communication in one of our episodes, and we were talking about dolphins, and they've made a device that you can wear now and communicate with certain noises. It'd be very cool if we could pattern flashing to squid. Like, could there be two-way communication between humans and squid if we could figure out the patterns? Like, if it meant more than just mating.
Right.
It's like Close Encounters of the Third Kind vibes.
You just go down, you'd have like a flashing vest.
Yeah.
And it would be like, man, that's so cool.
Give us time. I hope to see it in my lifetime.
So too.
You never know.
Okay, I love debunking myths about animals. Or like wrecking people's perceptions about animals. Like I love wrecking people's perceptions.
Laura loves to wreck people's perceptions.
Of like penguins and stuff.
Oh, okay.
So is there any myths that you're like, man, I love destroying that one about it?
God, I bet there are. Bobtail squid are not cuttlefish. That's a common misconception. Oh, reef squid are also not cuttlefish. Reef squid are often mistaken for cuttlefish because they have a fin that goes all the way around their mantle, and so do cuttlefish, but they're different. And they also have eyes that look pretty similar. It's very understandable, but that's not a common
myth.
That's not a common myth.
I'm trying to think of anything that I think I know about.
I think that kraken are probably
I was just going to say something with the giant squid.
Yeah. So so here's the thing about squid broadly. They have different approaches to staying neutrally buoyant. So to prevent themselves from sinking too much or floating too much. One of them is just to flap a lot. Just swim actively and stay where you are. Some of them will incorporate ammonia into their tissues. And so the reason they do that is that ammonia is less dense than seawater. And it's a lot like, have you ever heard of sharks will incorporate oil into their liver and stuff to help them stay neutrally buoyant? Yep. It's a totally similar mechanism. It's just instead of oil,
that makes sense.
They're using, ammonia.
Like
and so
their own waste. Is
totally.
It, like, I'm assuming.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And so that's why if you ever catch a giant squid, you shouldn't eat it because it'll taste so bad. It'll taste like
pee.
Ammonia. It's like cat pee. Like it's gross. But anyway, so when they're in the process of dying, a lot of times that like ammonia balance just gets totally out of whack. And so as a result, they'll float to the surface of the water. And so a lot of times when we encounter living giant squid, it's a dying giant squid. They just look like hell. Yeah. They're like disoriented. And often, it's really sad.
Seen at your worst moment.
I know, it's not fair. And that's
just trying to die here alone, but
please. I know. So there's like a video from maybe like 2 years ago of this Australian dude paddleboarding, and he encounters this giant squid, and the giant squid's like wrapping its arms around the paddleboard. But it's just disoriented and dying. It wasn't like aggressive.
Malicious.
It wasn't malicious. It was just like, who are you? What's going on? And that kind of is, okay, so imagine that you're in like Viking longship. Longships were like, I want to say 60 to 65 feet long. So not short, but not huge, right? Because a giant squid with its tentacles completely spread out is like 40 feet. But
which is just insane.
Which is real big. But like their actual bodies, so their mantle and their arms are nowhere near that long.
Well, right, not like sink like a ship.
They're not sink a ship big. Right. That's not the So I think maybe the big myth is that giant squid are gargantuan when they're in fact just very big squid. They're very big. They're bigger than me, but they're not huge. They're not tackle many, I don't know what you call those ships that have many sails. They're not like sink a pirate ship huge. They're just really big. So if you were in a skiff, like a little boat, or if you were on even like a Viking longship, I would imagine that maybe they could rock the boat a little bit if they encounter you.
See some crazy long arms and freak out.
What is that? Yeah.
But again, the poor thing's just dying, and it's probably just like, I just need to go, and everyone's like, freaking out about it.
Right.
How thick is a tentacle on a squid that big? Like
smaller than my wrist?
Okay, so like
tentacles though are thinner.
Oh, sorry, arms I suppose I should
Arms are probably my arm width, maybe.
Okay. So yeah,
maybe
nothing
a little
like
wider.
Long but not beefy.
Yeah, like colossal squid might be a little bigger. Colossal squid, by the way, are the biggest squid by weight.
Okay. So is Architeuthis, that's the
Architeuthis is the giant squid. Yes, correct.
Okay.
And the colossal squid is
Yes, somebody else who has trouble. Listen, that's this whole podcast. We could make a whole podcast episode just on me horribly trying to pronounce things. So I feel
it's hard. But maybe maybe a giant squid's as big as my like bicep in parts. I don't know.
Okay.
Not thin, not skinny, like pretty big, but not ridiculously huge.
Like when you see the Kraken in movies, we're talking a horse body thickness of arm, you know.
Yeah, that's like, not it. That's not real life. Yeah. So they're big. They're not that big, but they're still big.
Oh, I guess maybe is it a myth or not a myth? I guess it's just a question. What about the tooth?
It's beaks.
In a lot of things.
It's just beaks.
Right.
Yeah. So I believe in Pirates of the Caribbean, there's teeth in there, and I was incensed when I saw that. I was like, beaks are crazy enough. You don't need to invent circular teeth. Yeah. If there's an animal that big with a beak, a proportional beak,
that's terrifying.
That's terrifying. Why are we editing something already terrifying? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And there's tongue in there called a radula, and the radula is also covered in like little tiny teeth.
Yeah.
Like it's not, yes, exactly. So that's also scary. Open the beak and have it do its like creepy little radula move. That's horrible. That's horrible.
Lick the flesh off bones.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the fact that we'd be using teeth, I'm just like, this is just silly. This is foolishness. And I don't care for it. Yeah. Yeah. So no teeth except the radula teeth. It's mostly just beaks. And the beaks are very cool. And they all have one. That's one that we can say all cephalopods have. Beaks.
Okay. Beaks. Cool. All right, Katie, I think we got 2 more.
All right. So our manager, Kim, wants to know if you still have a beak box under your bed.
I do still have a beak box. Well, it's not under my bed anymore because I have more space than I did in college. My beaks are proudly displayed. Do I have any beaks near me?
What a good segue that we literally were just talking about beaks.
It's regular to ask me about squid beaks because I talked about it on the Ologies podcast. And
that's where she heard it and she was like curious.
Let me just say this. At the time, Ologies was not that big. So
yes.
I thought I could just tell this silly story about trying to make out with this boy. But now everyone in the world has heard that story. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Johnny, that I blew up your spot on that, but whatever. Anyway, no, I think all my squid beaks are downstairs. But I do have a bunch of squid fossils here for what that's worth. Hang on, I'm gonna lose my sorry, I'm like attached by the ears over here.
Yeah.
I've got some like ammonites. These are like
nice ones too.
Extinct cephalopods. I'm trying to get it to like, if you look at it with your eyeballs, you can see the iridescence in there.
Iridescence,
yeah. And it's not really happening. But here's one that has to show up on the camera.
You can see the rainbow for sure.
There's a rainbow in there. It's better with your eyes, but what are you going to do? So I've got a bunch of little ammonites. This one might do it for us.
What are they closest? Are they like a nautilus? Or are they
so they're on their own. Ammonites are totally like, there's ammonites, there's coleoid cephalopods, and then there's nautiloids.
Okay.
And so they all their whole lineage went extinct. So they didn't lead to anything. Meanwhile, the belemnites, do I have any belemnites here? What the heck is this? They're like basically they just look like squid, except that they had a shell inside their body. That's some kind of tooth, a mosasaur fossil.
Like a cuttlefish, but
Totally, exactly. And then over time, either that internalized shell turned into a pen, which are like they almost look like a very long, more bendy fingernail that keep the structure of the squid present. So like in a market squid, they have pens.
I remember that when we dissected.
Yeah. Bobtails don't have anything in there.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Okay. Then I was reading about your research and about cephalopod immunology. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about that?
Sure, yeah. The thing that I was really working on was how a bobtail squid, particularly their immune system, can distinguish between bacteria that it wants to keep around and the bacteria that it might want to destroy. This is all about how animals have beneficial relationships with bacteria. Bacteria lives all over us, lives all inside of our digestive system. And so understanding how animals maintain healthy relationships with bacteria while still killing things that would hurt you is an open question that we're learning more about all the time. And so what I was looking at is how do the immune cells called hemocytes inside squid, how they distinguish between them. And basically they're just reading the surface and looking at the sugars on the surface of the bacteria. And that's what they're using to say, hey, you're my buddy.
Good
hey,
or bad.
You're not. Yeah. Yeah.
That's really neat.
Yeah. So that's what I was doing. It was a lot of making movies of cells under a confocal microscope. Very fun. Love fancy microscopes. That's one of the things I miss the most about my job as a squid biologist. Yeah. So that's what I was doing. And I was also looking at, this would be a whole thing. We could just not get into it, but it's another beneficial organ that's only in female squid. So there's this organ, cat, that's in female squid and cuttlefish. Not all squid, only some squid, but in all cuttlefish.
Of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So it's called the ANG. That stands for accessory nidamental gland, but you don't have to worry about what it stands for. You can just call it the ANG. It's a bunch of tubules, and inside each tubule there's bacteria. And usually there's only one species of bacteria. We're starting to think maybe there's more than one sometimes, but whatever. The gist is that when the female goes to lay her eggs, she's taking the bacteria from those tubes and squeezing it out like pastry bag style and mixing it into the jelly coat of the eggs. Yeah. The reason she's putting bacteria into her egg coat is to protect the baby squid, because the bacteria will make antibiotics and antifungals that protect the baby.
Just like our own babies, like when we give birth.
So totally.
We do the same thing.
We do the same thing. Yeah. So they were looking at what is the diversity of different cephalopod species, ANGs, like how many species do all ANGs have in common? What determines what's in your ANG? Is it where you live or who you evolved from? All sorts of questions like that.
You'd think, you're right, I would think that it would be place-based.
Yeah, but it's not.
Right, which is so weird because you'd think that it would be where you are, you have to be adapted to deal with bacteria in the area.
Yeah, in that area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's very cool stuff.
Weird.
So that's what I worked on.
Yeah. Cool. Was there anything else you wanted to mention besides going to your Patreon and going to Skype a Scientist? Anything else?
That's really it. Follow me on social media, please, especially because I might lose all of my Twitter followers in any day.
Yeah.
I'm at Sarah McAttack on all the social medias that I'm on. On Mastodon, I'm at Sarah McAttack at scicom.xzy. XYZ, duh. And I'm on Tumblr and Twitter and Instagram at Sarah McAttack and TikTok at Sarah McAttack as well.
Okay, and we'll put all of that in the episode description.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, then with all this being said, and the importance of science communication, how can our listeners participate in science communication?
Tell your friends fun squid facts. Text the squid facts hotline and then text your friends some squid facts. That's good. If you're a scientist, participate in Skype a Scientist. We'll give you opportunities to connect with classrooms all over the place. I think doing science communication on social media is a great place to both practice and also actually do science communication. And if you're a scientist that wants to bring a science communication street art project to wherever it is that you live, whether it's this kind of street art that I tend to do or commissioned murals, please reach out to me. I can help with that. Let me know what you want to do, because Skype a Scientist also will become part of grants for the National Science Foundation to help make projects happen locally wherever you are. So that's a thing that we can do to help out with whatever you got going on. Happy to help.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool. All right, so finally, and this is definitely our most important question of this whole episode, if you could be any species of squid, which would you be and why? Choose wisely.
I think Humboldt squid. Humboldt squid eat each other. I take that back. But they're so big and strong and cool, and they talk to each other.
Yeah.
And I like talking, so that attracts me. Maybe a reef squid because they're beautiful. They're like rainbow colored, and they also talk to each other, and they spend all night eating and all day talking to each other. So that sounds ideal.
That sounds
in the Caribbean, right?
In the reef, it's beautiful there. Like a part of me wants to be a deep sea squid because I just want to experience what that is. But I'm like, will I be cold? And then I'm like, what a human thing to think. Of course, they're not going to be cold. Right. They're going to be regular.
Or would you be? Live. And right, like I would be lonely.
I would be too, but maybe they're not lonely, right? Because that's just their vibe. But would I be me in their bodies, living their experience? I don't know. What a question. But I think reef squid is like, it's going to be a good time. You're going to have a good time.
Yeah. Sounds like the way to go.
That's a good choice.
Yeah.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. I've definitely learned a lot about both science communication and squid.
Great.
And as a fellow science communicator, we appreciate the fact that you are passionate about it and that you want to reach out and talk to people.
Yeah, great. Thank you for having me. This was really fun.
Yeah, keep doing what you're doing. We will push your stuff too. Skype a Scientist sounds like a really awesome thing to be doing. And I actually will keep that in mind too for other projects of mine.
Great. Sounds good.
All right. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.